So we'll go into the mantra number 5 of the Purusha Sukta. Tasmad viradajayata virajo adhipurushaha sajato atyarichyata paschad bhumimatho puraha. So these 4 mantras, actually 2 mantras, are the basis for the entire Sankhya branch of study. Sankhya Shastra, the whole of Sankhya Shastra is based on these 4 mantras. So here is the meaning. Tasmat. So we have already seen that the Mahapurusha is Sahasra Shirsha Purusha, who is of the infinite heads, infinite eyes. That is the Param. That is Paramatman, Parabrahman, Tasmat. From that great being, the Paramatman, Virat Ajayata. So Virat or Virad is the gross universe. That is also known as the Samashti Jagat Deha. So our individual body is called as Vyashti. Individual body without the life force separately is identified as Vyashti or just Deha or body. So similarly, the universe also, the entire universe, the gross material entire universe is in the first iteration, it is called as Virat. And this Virat, see the idea of body, the idea of universe, what does that convey? It conveys the first manifestation of form. Because it is possible to give name only when there is a form. Otherwise, how can you give a name? So therefore, what is the first thing that should be created in the beginning of the creation? Paramatman or Parabrahman or the absolute God is formless. He is also cannot be identified by any characteristic. There is no guna. So there is no guna, nirguna. There is no characteristics, nirvikara. So, and then he is infinite. And anything infinite cannot be known by a finite instrument, that is our mind. And therefore that now reduces into a perceptible way. The perceptible way is it must have form. And therefore, as soon as you have got a form, we have got to give it a name. And therefore the scripture also says, Tasmat Virat Ajayata. From there, Virat, the entire universe, which has got form and thus can be named. Isn't it? Because when do you give name to your child? Only when you see the form. You may decide, okay, I'm going to give this name to the child even when the child is in the womb. But the thing is, you actually do the naming ceremony only after seeing the form. So similarly, the naming ceremony for the universe also has happened on its birth. So therefore, it is Virat Ajayata. Ajayata means it took birth, it came out. Now, how did this come out? What is the basis? The basis for the existence of the form in the formless is possible because it is Virajaha Adhi. Tasmad Viradajayata Virajo Adhi. Virajaha Adhi, making this Virat as support. So now, what happened? There is the absolute, indefinable, infinite entity called Purusha. And that Purusha has to be brought down into form. So in the first iteration, what happened? A form called Virat, which is Brahmanda, came out. And therefore it was given a name. And came out from where? On what basis? The basis is the Mahapurusha or Paramatma, who is formless. So important point to note is form has come out of the formless. That's the only thing that can happen, because if you say form has come out of form, then that becomes a subset. But it is not something that is supported. The support can come only from the formless. And therefore, from the formless Parabrahman, Virajaha Adi, making this Virat as a support, Purushaha Ajayata. Purushaha Ajayata means, who is this Purusha? In contrast to the Purusha who is having the 1,000 headed, which was explained in the first of the mantra, this Purusha is a subset of the consciousness part of the Absolute. So the consciousness part of the Absolute also got a consciousness, and that consciousness entered into the inert Brahmanda. And until such time, you cannot call this Virat as Virat Purusha. So therefore, what does the Purusha Sukta do? It first, for the sake of our understanding, it says, okay, form came, but that form is meaningless without giving it a name, and therefore let us give the name Virat. Having given the name, how will we communicate and interact with that? For the sake of interaction, it must contain the consciousness principle. And that consciousness principle cannot be outside of the original infinite consciousness. Because as soon as we say it is infinite, it cannot be something else, cannot be there elsewhere. And therefore it is also part of the original primordial consciousness principle. Therefore Virat is Adhi, or based upon Paramatma. The Chaitanyam Purusha is also based on Paramatma, but this Chaitanyam and the universe, the gross universe, both of them came together. When they came together, then it is to be called as Virat Purusha. So Virat Purusha was formed. So this is how the logic is building up. As you can see, this is the first, one of the oldest of the hymns, and therefore the discipline of Sankhya was not formed yet, and therefore here they give the clue as to how to create a scripture of Sankhya Shastra. So Virat Adhyaya. So therefore for us to understand what they do is, for us to understand what we can comment on this mantra is, he is the creator called the Chaturmukha Brahma. So the four-headed Brahma, who is the creator in this sense of mythological sense. So therefore we have got Chaturmukha Brahma. So what is this Chaturmukha Brahma made up of? Again, if you refer back to the mantra, it is made up of the Virat gross form and the Purusha consciousness form, and therefore later Vedanta picked up this thread and said, in Virat, which is the gross form, there is the energy or Chaitanya form called Hiranyagarbha. So Hiranyagarbha in combination with Virat becomes the Virat Purusha. So therefore, look at the mantra now. Tasmat Virat Ajayata. How? Virajaha Adhi. Then he became Purusha. This Purusha, what is the difference between this Purusha and the earlier Purusha we discussed? The earlier Purusha is Parabrahman. Therefore he has no form. Therefore there is no locus. But the inferred Purusha, Hiranyagarbha, he has to have a locus. And that locus is Virat. And that Virat and this, see here again you will see that whether it is Virat or Hiranyagarbha, both of them are Purusha Adhi, based only on the original Brahman, Parabrahman. Then as soon as this Hiranyagarbha was born, as soon as this Hiranyagarbha with Virat was born, Sajataha. Sajataha, one who having taken birth, having taken manifestation, Atyarichyata. Sajato Atyarichyata. Atyarichyata means he assumed many forms. The very important point here is the very many forms that it has taken. What are the very many forms that it has taken? It can be all the 86 million species of the creation who have got life force. That is called as the Jivis. It can also be the inert matter. So both inert matter and conscious matter are all Purusha Adhi. So having emanated from the same source, every one of these manifestations must inherit the original characteristic of the origin. And hence, all of us have only one Purusha that is occupying in us. This point is extremely important, otherwise we discriminate between one living being and another living being. How do you practice non-discrimination? How do you practice non-discrimination? Only when you know that the inhering life principle is only one. That you can see the concept of Advaita also is already embedded into the Purusha Sukta. So
but Virat portion also should be the same.
Virat portion, Purusha is also the same. The microcosmic Purushas are also the same. Only thing is the outer shell. Because of the magnitude of the outer shell, the universe has a bigger outer shell, the individual has a smaller outer shell. That's all the difference. But even the outer shell also in composition is no different in character from the original shell, because all of them have to be made only of the 5 elements. So one who knows this, later on Bhagavad Gita and other texts will say, one who knows this, for him he has no discrimination, for him he has no confusion, for him he is not enveloped in avidya or ignorance. So that is the deep depth of...
And conceptually we can also say that all the bodies are within one Virat Purusha body. So
exactly. We are all one organ. That is the Vishishtadvaita school picked it up and said that here is one Virat Purusha only, and each one of that us is a limb of that Purusha. So you can imagine that it can be taken as one single cell of the Virat Purusha. Each one of us represent one cell, and all of us are part of the original whole. That is what the Vishishtadvaita school picked it up, and that also has got evidence in this Shruti. Then, therefore, Paschat, after this, Bhumi, that means the earth and such matter in whom inhabitation is possible. Atha, then afterwards, Puraha, the Shariras also came. Pura means Sharira. So what is the distinction between Bhumi and Pura? So the Bhumi and Pura is, in the Pura, it is not only a matter which is conducting itself as though conscious, because we are all our bodies are conscious. But the body by itself has no consciousness. It acquired consciousness because Purusha is there inside us. Otherwise it would have been a dead body. That Purusha is supplying the consciousness principle. Therefore, why did we call this as Pura and not as matter? Because the difference between inert matter and live entity is called Saptadhatu. That has to be supplemented in our commentary. The Sapta Dhatu is listed as Tvak, Charma, Mamsa, Rudhira, Majja, Snayu, Asthini. 7 of them. Tvak means the external skin. Charma means the skin that can recognize touch. Tvak, charma. So that's the outermost layer. In that outermost layer there is mamsa. Mamsa means the flesh. Then in that flesh there is rudhira. Rudhira means blood. In that there is marrow. And in that there are nerves. In that within in the next depth there is the bone. So these are, so that means the Purusha who is of the material part, that material part became these 7 entities. But in each one of these 7 entities, the consciousness principle also entered. So if the consciousness principle had not entered, then we would not have been live. So therefore the Tasmat Virat Ajayata Virajo Adhi Purusha Sajato Atyarichyata Paschat Bhumim Atha and Puraha. Paschat Bhumim Atho Puraha. So how do we summarize this? The primeval being who is Sahasrasirsha Purusha, whose only 1/4 is manifest, because it's only 1/4 that is manifest. The 3/4 is in Divi. So only 1/4 is this. Padosya Vishwabhutani, and they desire to create. What did he desire to, what did this primeval entity desire to create? Sashana, Anashana, Sashana, those entities which eat food, Anashana, those entities which don't eat food. So when you say those entities which eat food, means they are sentient beings. When you say those entities which do not eat food, means it is insentient beings like stone, rock, etc. So Sashana Nashane Abhi happened. To enable that to happen, the first creation was from the 1/4 part of 1/4, not exactly mathematical 1/4, but a very small portion of that had to morph itself, modify itself into Virat. The etymology of the word Virat is Vividhena Rajati iti Virat. Vividhena Rajati means what? Each component of this Virat shines in its own glory. And therefore it is called Virat. That means water has its own glory, fire has its own glory, air has got its own glory, and all of them together is much more glorious than the sum of the individual glory. And that's why you cannot help using any word other than Virat, because Vividhena Rajati iti Virat. So this Virat, he shining forth in myriad ways, and is having the basis for the creation as Virat Purusha, and then this Virat Purusha evolved. We have to take it as evolved or emanated from within himself. There is no external agency which made it happen. So from within oneself it expanded. This is also very critical, because how can we grow spiritually? Our spiritual growth is not imposed from an external agency. Only the external agency shows us how to evolve spiritually from within ourselves. So therefore, what is the role of the Guru? The role of the Guru is only to show the technique of finding yourself. That is all. Because the Guru cannot bring and show you what you are not. He can only show what you are, but what you that you are is not known to you. Same thing is there in the creation itself. So there is no external agency which is bringing out all these things. It all happens from within only. And then he expanded into in the sentient beings. The sentient beings are of two kinds. And one is the divine entities, another is the non-divine living entities. So the only way we can use is the Sanskrit word Devakara and Jivakara. Of divine nature, Deva, and of the mortal entities which is subject to the 6 changes. So this Devakara and Jivakara, these two entities came. So Brahmanda as Deha emanated from the self-complete, Swayam Paripurna, Adi Purusha, the beginning Purusha. And then this, how did this happen? Because in that Parama Purusha there is Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti in the potential state. The power to know and the power to do. And that with the power to know and the power to do, the gross form comes out. The inherent Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti of Parabrahman is used. So whatever forms or Shaktis that are created, however different they appear, all of them cannot modify the original Swarupa of Parabrahman. Because this is an important question, because once a subset has been formed, to that extent the original must be less arithmetically. Now here it is saying no, that is not possible, because it is something that cannot be taken away, because Purnamadaha Purnamidam, that is complete, and whatever is derived from it is also complete. And therefore this Purusha is also complete, that Purusha is also complete. All this discussion is necessary because we are stuck with the external form. And there is a distinction between external forms. And what are those external forms? It man, woman, animal, stone, etc., etc. We have got so many classifications we have made, and instead of taking it only as a classification of its functionality, we are looking at its classification as intrinsic. And therefore we have got discrimination of one against the other, preference of one over the other. And that is why you see there is so much strife in the world. So unless you go through this kind of thought and this kind of contemplation, the universality of every individual cannot be internalized. And therefore sarvabhutastam atmanam atmanam menupashati is impossible. To see oneself in the world and to see the world in oneself, it is impossible until and unless we understand that every single emanation is from the original source. So that Purusha Sukta is establishing. And then at the same time the Paramatma Swarupa does not alter. So this has also got a deep significance for us. Just because I am born as a man, I am no superior intrinsically than an animal. But because I am vested with a little more intelligence, I have got a responsibility towards beings of less intelligence. Isn't it? And therefore, that is where we introduce the concept of compassion. And as soon as you introduce the concept of compassion, simultaneously concept of friendship comes, Maitri comes. And wherever there is Maitri and wherever there is Karuna, there is always joy and there is always a non-attachment. All the 4 qualities that Patanjali Maharshi talks about in Yoga Sutra can be achieved. And for that, this knowledge is important. And then, so the emanating Purusha, first of all, expresses himself as Virat Purusha in universe Brahmanda. In the next step, this gross Brahmanda Purusha becomes the Jiva Swarupa, and then this is also given to us by our great Guru Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Jiva Bhutam Mahabaho Yedam Dharyate Jagat. All that I talked about so much for the last 10 minutes, Krishna summarizes in one sentence in chapter number 7, I think verse number 5, probably. Jiva Bhutam Mahabaho Yayedam Dharyate Jagat. The universe has me as the life spirit. Then with this Brahmanda, inhabited by this Jivaropi Purusha, he spreads everywhere and spreads into everything. And then the Charachara Jagat, he enters into everything. So if you were to write a flowchart, this is what happens. Paramatman, from that comes Brahmanda, and then Purusha enters, it becomes Virat Purusha, then the Brahmanda Deha is universe, Brahmanda's Jiva is Chaturmukha Brahma or Hiranyagarbha, and from them the 5 elements will come, then Jiva will come, together the movable and immovable is created, Charachara Prakriti is created. So from gross universe to subtle universe to the actual perceptible earth and the various entities that inhabit the earth. So therefore, now I said we have got 2 entities, there is Devakara and Jivakara. The Devas now take upon themselves a task. And the task they take about is to create the subsidiary creations by means of doing a yajna. And what kind of an inventory they had to create this yajna? Because for doing any worship, any puja, anything, you need an inventory. So what was the inventory? We will see in the next class.